Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Macomb County Community Mental Health Services Board to order. And the first item on the agenda would be to adopt the agenda.
Support.
We have a motion by Doherty, supported by Flynn. Any discussion or questions on the agenda? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is hearing of the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this body? Please give your name and address, and you have 5 minutes to speak, and please address the comments to the board.
Good evening, members of the Community Mental Health Board. My name is Joseph Hunt. I live at 8306 Stanley. I'm a homeowner and taxpayer from the city of Warren. This is my first time speaking before the Community Mental Health Board. Usually I do go to the Macomb County board meetings, and I am basically a participant in government. I'll just speak on this portion on the items that are on the agenda, which is protocol for the board. Specifically, as a person who is an active participant in government, one of the issues that I was thinking of bringing up with the board is actually on the agenda regarding your discussion, posting of video recordings of your board program and budget committee and full board meetings. I couldn't agree more. Primarily, the Macomb County Board maintains a YouTube site to where people like myself that can't always make the inconvenient 3 p.m. board meetings will be able to all of a sudden look back and review the information that's discussed as far as at an open meeting regarding the issues that affect Macomb County and its residents. So hopefully you have a technology plan in place. The infrastructure has already been created with the Capital Projects Fund. So hopefully you can move forward by putting not only these meetings online, but also revamping your website so that the look and feel is more in conformance with the Macomb County blue background. When I went there today, I was trying to gather information regarding the various services that the Community Mental Health Board is responsible for under the Public Act, and a lot of it was very discombobulated as far as being able to type in a zip code and basically go to a drop-down menu and be able to all of a sudden specifically look for specific needs that the community might be looking for on the internet, because those people with substance abuse and those with mental health problems and specific needs of the community mental health services of the community or of the county. Specifically, there's a lot of point and click and getting lost and having to go back to the home page. So if that could be cleared up, it would basically give an understanding of what services are available. I'm tech savvy and I got lost, so maybe by all of a sudden simplifying it, that would be beneficial. Another thing on the agenda is basically the board approval of executive director contract. I'm in complete 100% approval of that. John Kinch has appeared at the board many times over the years and has fully explained in very detailed financial terms exactly what the status of all the programs are that affect the general fund, the state revenue sharing, all of the different grants that go into the special revenue funds as well as the general fund. And so I'm completely 100% behind John Kinch's contract being approved. I don't know if that went out to bid, but don't change what's not broken. His dedication to the Macomb County and its residents is greatly appreciated, especially because I live in the city of Warren. I see an exorbitant amount of mental health people and substance abusers. And of course, because I've been on the campaign trail 6 out of 6 years, you run into all different walks of life, and a lot of times they don't know what type of services are available from the county, only because, number one, they don't have the internet, two, they don't have access to the resources to get to the buildings that provide these resources. But like I say, in light of the fact that there have been extreme budget cuts at the state, I feel that the director is doing an absolutely fantastic job. I didn't bring this up at the board meeting because I was absent, but I caught the replay. If you haven't seen the replay of his presentation, my suggestion is that you should. But I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anyone else who'd like to address this board? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to approval of the minutes from the regular board meeting held October 25 of 2017. Motion by Doherty, support by Kraft. Any comments or discussion on the minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is approval of the standing committee meetings, which is 5A, B, C, D, and G. Looks like. Am I? All of them? All right. Move to approve. 5A through J. And these were, thank you. All right, and these were all items that were discussed at the prior program and budget meeting. So we've worked through all the issues with those. Commissioner Doherty?
Just there was a question on one of the. Apologies.
That's K.
It's K. Oh, thank you. Oh, so that's separated. Thank you. Right, we're not including K? It's through,
I don't have a K.
We have a K. It went to J.
online, there's no K.
I keep hitting this thing, but does it register with you?
So online, there's no K. Correct?
Not J, not including J.
No.
It ends
Do you
in
have a
J.
letter K? Is there agenda item K?
Yeah, there is, but that we're holding that separate because that's the one there was a question on.
Okay, but as long as we have the same, what is item K?
Residential facility B.
Residential facility B, that's what
Is
I have for
item
J.
J on this list.
Okay.
All right, let's, item A is updated MCO policy 2-001, person-centered planning.
Yes?
Item B is provision and
No,
distribution.
we have A as program and budget. Oh, just the minutes. So A is the minutes.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
the
A is the
minutes are not
minutes.
on here.
Okay, very good. So we're not missing other,
Right.
we received the minutes in a separate document. All right. So we are going to go through, we're going to pull out the lease agreement on residential facility B for separate discussion. Is that correct? All right.
So, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, do I still have the floor?
Yes.
So I just wanted to know, I believe that was the property where we were asking about the construction. Yeah, and that we had thought, if, that's all I want. I don't know that we need to separate. I just wanted that answered.
Okay. So do we have, is there anything that
If
can
there's a need to
address that?
separate it, that's fine, but that was my only question. Thank you.
Lou?
If you have a motion in support, I'd like to separate J and K.
So you want to, residential facility A and residential facility B?
I'd like them both separated.
Okay, without objection, they'll be separated. So let's, before we continue on that, then let's a vote on everything from the minutes through the Citizen Advisory Council term limits discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, those carry. So now we have lease agreement on residential facility A.
Move to approve. Support.
All right, so we have a motion by Doherty, supported by Brown. Any questions or comments on that? Commissioner Birdie?
Well, my comments refer to both A and B, which would be J and K.
That's fine.
I have been very uncomfortable with this since program and budget, and I am uncomfortable with publishing lease renewals for group homes without publishing residential addresses. And I will explain why. I was a member of this board when group homes first came into play, and it was a very disruptive situation. And local communities objected on the basis that group homes did not fit into single-family planning, as single-family planning considerations for neighborhoods were approved in those days. And local neighbors, fearing change, objected to any change of this nature, and it was extremely chaotic. I was a member of the board. I was also a member of the Warren City Council at the time, and I was also later on a member of the Board of Commissioners when all of this was going on. The state legislature dealt with the problem by passing a law ultimately that indicated occupants of a group home, regardless of their makeup, were to be considered as a single family. And consequently, local objections to group homes went away on the basis that the legislature said that they were single-family approved dwellings regardless of local objections under the law. This board has always taken a great deal of pride in its transparency. What we do in the full noonday sun, and we do it for all people able to view it and to comment, and I think we take a great deal of pride in that. I know that this board does not in any way intend any action that would dim transparency. I want to say that clearly.
Point of
However-
information, Madam Chair, point of information to Lou, if I may. Where does it say a group home?
A and B are both group homes.
I know they're homes, but are they group homes?
Of course they are. I'm surprised you didn't know that.
No, it's the idea that a group home is about 10 people.
It is not. It
Okay.
is 4, it is 6, it is whatever the occupancy happens to be.
Well, then you're knocking
Right.
all the homes.
Let's get back to
Please.
the issue of of the addressing,
Okay.
making that public.
And frankly, I am very concerned that publishing contracts without the appropriate residential addresses can lead the public into feeling that there's a transparency factor that is being overcome. And as I said before I was interrupted, that I know it's not the intent of this board to do that. However, I am fully aware that reality often takes the place of what is the facts. So I am, for my own conscience, indicating that from this point on, that if we publish contracts for homes without residential addresses, I will have to vote no, because I feel that it's not the appropriate way to represent group homes in communities in the county. And if we do it without publishing their address so that anyone who looks at an agenda can be fully aware of what we're doing, in a sense, we're clouding transparency where I don't think we really intend to do that. So, for the record, I will vote no on anything that does not publish the logical residential address.
Okay. And before I continue, my microphone?
No, the request to speak.
It might. But I thought it popped up. It would just pop up to, oh, here, request to speak. No, it's not working. I pushed that, and I don't see anything. So I'm very sorry about that. Lou, I agree. I think there's a place to, I think that the addresses need to be put in there. But at this point, the staff had thought it was not, and I personally think the staff is also very knowledgeable about what's appropriate and what is not. But there is a request that went into Corporation Council. John just told me he still hasn't received the response yet, but Corporation Council is looking into it. And it's my understanding that if somebody from the public did FOIA, they would get the information because it is public information. So I would just request that.
Why would somebody have to do a Freedom of Information request, which costs them money to find out what they should be able to see immediately?
I don't disagree with you. I guess what I'm asking is, can we, that we go ahead and approve these, because we're not, if there's no objection to the actual lease itself, and the issue be the address, we will get that information, and I think we would even go back and post that information, on the minutes from this meeting. That information will be made available.
I'm not sure I follow what you're saying. I don't know how you can adjust it after the fact.
Well, you can, we can have it, the next meeting disclose the prior meeting was whatever address. I mean, there's many ways of doing it. I just want to say that I wanted you to know that I agree with you, but I also, honor the staff. They know a whole lot more about state law regarding the community mental health code than we do. So if it's a matter of that's what I'm saying. All right, I need, I've got Bush, Flynn, and Sierra Matero.
Hopefully go to sneeze. Okay, here I am. That question, to me, that confuses the motion to me. That it should be a discussion that we have later when we have more information from corporate counsel and some more from staff, that it could be an item that Lou discusses longer if he wants to. But aside from the motion of approving the lease agreement. Because it has nothing to do with the lease agreement.
Correct. Okay,
The business that we do with that provider.
sure. Commissioner Flynn?
Madam Chair, on page 173, it says, tenant is willing to lease the premises for use as a leased foster care facility. Has nothing to say about a group home. It's a foster care facility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sierra Matero?
Getting formal here. Just for Mr. Birdie's information, 'cause I think he missed the meeting, and as a reminder, this came up because we were distributing on the website to a much larger group not just the agenda, but the whole packet, basically. And so there was some concern raised on privacy issues. But if I remember correct, and it was done, and the staff suggested we do it as an experiment to see if there was any problems with it. But if I remember correctly, John, correct me if I'm wrong, the agendas that were broadly distributed in the past, before everything went online, the board members would get the full packet. The bulk of the people that were CC'd, there were like a ton of people who were copied. Barbara would know better, best of all, would only get the agenda page, wouldn't get all of the documentation unless they asked for it, or FOIA did, or simply asked for it. I'm not sure you'd even have to FOIA the address if somebody called and made a request. So there was a suggestion that we kind of experiment with this. I'm sensitive to Lou's concern. We didn't, as a policy, adopt that this is what we were going to do. What we did was we said, all right, try it for a few weeks or a month or whatever, and let's see, if there's objections or concerns otherwise. Now we have heard some objections from a board member and some contrary arguments that I think are well taken. And if my recollection is correct, when we only sent out the agenda page, that agenda page did include the address anyways, did it not, Barbara? So the fact that we're adding all this additional, making all of this additional information is irrelevant to the question. If it had been a problem to publicize these addresses in the past, we probably would have heard of them and have not. The issue that Lou raises is one that thankfully has gone away, I don't think exclusively because of the law, although the law helped in that regard, but also because of a welcome change in communities' perception of group homes, foster care homes, other type of homes, whether they be for developmentally disabled or for mentally ill. They have now seen that they're not the danger to the community that people initially feared, and we've done a great job of dealing with the stigma issue, and not just us, but a whole lot of people, thankfully. So we don't have that problem anymore. The question was, are we opening ourselves up to robberies or somebody who might want to interfere with somebody's privacy? That could really happen to anybody, but by the same token, I think that information is so readily available. It's kind of, I think we were being overly cautious because of concerns that there are a lot of things going on in this world that a lot of us wonder why they go on in this world, but they do. So, I mean, I think I would urge Lou to vote for A and probably B, depending on if we get the answer to the question that I expect we will, and that we go back to the old system and not redact any further.
Thank you. And Commissioner Brown and then Doherty.
I do think our consumers are very vulnerable individuals, and whatever we decide, we have to think of their security and their safety. And there's a lot of bad people that make it their mission in life to target vulnerable populations. And so giving out an address could not be a good thing sometimes. So I do think we have to keep that in the picture as we're making this decision.
Thank you. Commissioner Doherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too, like previous speakers, would encourage us to pass this item today, but that we put this issue of the display of the addresses on a future agenda where we can get the information that we're waiting for. But when this discussion was brought up, like some of the previous speakers, I think the difference between then and now is, number one, there are a lot of different rules about privacy now that information is so readily available on the internet, as even our guest, as one of our audience participants spoke to this evening, that we are going to be publicizing, and I suspect we will be publicizing all of our information much more broadly, including possibly future changes to the website, making a lot more broadly broadcast. And I want to say, too, that it's not a big secret about where these homes are. I mean, even though it says Lease A, it does say Sterling Heights, and it does give the zip code. So, I mean, anybody that is concerned about whether it's in their city, in their zip code, and wants to know what's going on in their neighborhood, all they need to do is pick up the phone. I don't even think they need to submit a formal FOIA for it. And I think they can find out what the situation is. We're not hiding information, but rather just taking a cautionary step to maintain security, like Commissioner Brown said. I think that that's appropriate in this day and age. And like I say, I was trying to look up some of the privacy laws. I know in my line of work, we are very, very sensitive to people's addresses, lots of different things, their dates of birth. It's all doesn't rise to the same occasion as maybe like a social security number, but it's still considered private information, so we need to be thinking about that. Thank you.
All right. Did you want to say anything?
Just, your points are well taken. It is true, to my knowledge, that we have never had an incident where the public has encroached upon the privacy of, those folks that are in the group home, from my knowledge. We also believe that as an administration that our consumers' health and safety would be a little bit better off in today's world if we did not publish the address onto the agenda. We did have some discussion internally, and our preliminary opinion, based on some of the legal consult inside the office, suggests that we are within our right to not, or to redact the address. However, it was my decision that Aaron Thomas and Corporation Counsel for the county is the spokesperson and who supports us before we bring anything to this board. So I've redirected the opinion to Aaron Thomas. We hope to have that back to the board on December 13th. His opinion on whether or not it's permissible and legal to redact or not.
Thank you. Commissioner Birdie?
Just for the record, up until these two items, we have never published a group home reissue without publicizing the address. It's never happened before. We now have a waiting list for group home beds. Never happened before, and the state law does not look favorably on the fact that we have a waiting list for group home beds, and that's happened because of the cutbacks that we've had to make, where we've shifted consumers into group homes and there are no beds. And I will say this to you, if you go to put a new group home into a neighborhood and you don't publish the address, you're in for more trouble than you've ever seen in your lifetime. So I just tried in a friendly fashion to say to you this evening, I'm uncomfortable with lease renewals on group homes or new group homes into neighborhoods that do not publish their real address. I think that that violates transparency. That's a personal thing. My honor code does not allow me to do that. So I've said to you that if you continue this, I will vote no. Now, you can go ahead and do whatever you want to do. I have just, in an honorable fashion, told you why I don't think it's a good policy to redact addresses. Someone is going to show up here and say, what are you doing in my neighborhood, and why are you hiding what you're doing? And it's going to be a great day when I hear you explain why you don't want to publish the address
Right.
when we have never, ever had a problem with a nursing home from a public standpoint. Now, I'm just telling you, my honor code will not allow me to do that. Now, you go ahead and do what you want to do.
All right, point well taken. I don't think anyone here wants to violate the law or anything else, so we will be getting a response to that, and we will do whatever the right thing is. Seeing no other speakers, all in favor of approving? Pardon me?
What's the motion? It's on just one.
Lease A.
Was just one,
Yeah, lease A.
yes.
Residential facility A. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
All right, we have,
Please record me as a no.
yep, be recorded. Next is item lease agreement, residential facility B. Motion by Bush, support by Flynn. Any discussion on that? I have Commissioner Bush and then Doherty.
The issue was with the deck, and I don't see TJ here, but does anyone know if the deck was, he thought it might be fixed by our full board.
The deck has been completed except for a small portion of one rail, and they've put caution tape on it, and that was as of an hour ago. Well, that's, I had a glitch, but we have pictures, but we couldn't bring them to you today. But we have been assured, and both TJ and I are highly recommending the home. Again, it's one of our top quality homes, and the deck that was done is a great improvement and was done in a high quality.
Thank you. Commissioner Doherty? Oh, Tracy?
Yes, I'm sorry. There was an inventory. The Menards didn't have the specific rail, so they're ordering it. It's going to take a couple days, but they've put caution tape in there. And no one's, of course, using the deck until that's done. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else, all in favor of approving residential? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know. Go ahead, Commissioner Nicoven.
Just for clarification on the discussion about blocking out the addresses, are we passing this on then to get an answer from
That goes with-
council on the situation with the addresses? Or are we gonna put this out and be blacked out onto the website? If so, if you read it, you can look through all the stuff and see all the numbers you want. It's not covered up well.
It is what it is.
Well, I'm just, it just. so
Thank you
it's-
for pointing that out.
But is that what we're doing, waiting for council on how it's gonna be published onto the website?
Oh, before it's published? No, it'll get published, but we can always correct the minutes at the next meeting and then publish the
Okay,
corrected minutes.
All right, thank you.
We haven't approved the minutes of tonight's meeting anyway,
okay.
so.
Okay,
Issue on addressing this lease B?
I want to ask John, what question has been put to Corporation Counsel? What specifically has he been asked to rule on?
We've asked him to rule on the legal permissibility to redact the address of the group home on the agendas that are published for the board and the community.
Thank you.
All right. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor of approving residential facility B signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
I am opposed.
All right.
Please record me as a no.
Thank you. So noted. Next, we'll move on to item 6A, amendment number 1 to the Managed Mental Health Supports and Services fiscal year 2018 contract. We have a motion by Flynn, supported by Doherty. Would you like to address that?
Sure.
Oh,
This-
support by Bush.
This is the First Amendment to the CMHSP General Fund contract. Contracts, finance, and issues. CFI, through the Board Association, typically negotiates the contract with the department, comparably to the PHP contract. There were amendments made to local dispute resolution process, and that was just to streamline the process. There was no changes to the policy. Technical review for continuation of education requirements for recipient rights staff, and that was technical, nothing substantive. I talked to Mark Michelo about it. He had no issues with it. Another technical review for course content requirements for CMHSP and provider staff. Also, the next one, C63424, recipient rights process. These are all technical, no substantive changes. The reporting requirements to include a revised annual submission for fiscal year to add DD and mental health as required fields as proxy measures. LAR licensing requirements for specialized in the 837 files, electronic file that we send to the department. And the last piece was a technical review for behavior management treatment review. There's a new requirement for a BCBA certified individual to be on the committee. So we have a behavior management review committee, and so the technical requirement is to have a BCBA on that committee. And so the recommendation of Mr. Sheehan and the Board Association and CFI was that this board approve that, and we sign it and return it to the department by December 5th.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? I don't see any speakers on the list here. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is a discussion regarding the posting of video recordings of the Macomb County Community Mental Health Board Program and Budget Committee and the full board meetings. And the reason why it's these two that are listed is because those are the two committees that meet here in this facility. Our meetings are now being recorded. And I've sent you the link to the recording so you could see what they look like. And what I would recommend is that we have them posted on the Board of Commissioners has a page where they show committee meetings of various boards and commissions along with the agenda. After the meeting has been held, it shows the minutes, and then it also shows the recording, the audiovisual recording of the meeting. And we can, it's very easy to host that on the Board of Commissioners website. In fact, it's probably easier for them if they do host it than to always not have them on there. We can also, if we choose to at some point, have them on the Community Mental Health website or a link from that to the board's website. But I think the board wants some direction from this group as to what we do. So that's why this is out here. This agenda's item is on here. And if anyone has any questions about that, I'd like to hear that, and I would also entertain a motion tonight if anyone's prepared for that.
I make a motion to approve that. I think it works really well for the Board of Commissioners. It adds to the transparency that Lou is talking about, and it's pretty simple for us to handle too, especially if the board office is going to assist with all of that. Click on the link and watch the video. So I'd make a motion to approve that.
So, right, we click on the link, look at the agenda, click on the link, watch the video, and then there's another link to actually read the recorded minutes.
I support that.
All right, so we have a motion by Kraft, supported by Brown. Is that whose voice was that? Joan?
Yeah, I want to
Joan
make a
Flynn?
comment.
Okay. Yep, Marilyn?
Okay. I just wanted to say that I missed the last program and budget meeting, and so I watched the video. However, when a microphone is not turned on, you can't hear a thing.
Yeah.
So if we are going to try to record this, people need to be mindful to turn their microphones on.
Thank you, I agree. I should look at my list. Oh, my goodness. I don't know. Commissioner Birdie and Ciamatero?
I do support it, but I wasn't clear as to whether or not that would be on a face page of Community Mental Health or through the Board of Commissioners page. Which way did you say the access to the meeting would be?
I believe the motion on the floor right now is that it would just go to it would be on the Board of Commissioners page where they host meetings. There's more than us. There's various other boards and commissions of the county that are on that page. That's what the motion is, as I understand it.
Okay, I was just saying that we have a face page. If that's the case, on our face page, there ought to be a reference back to the Board of Commissioners face page also, because I would think that if I were at the public at large, I would go to our face page first before I would go to the Board of Commissioners to look up our meeting.
And when you say face page, you mean the web page, our
Yes.
website?
Yes. There ought to be a reference that
On the
our meetings
homepage?
are on the Board of Commissioners web situation.
Are you offering that as an amendment?
If I need to, yes, of course, but I think that reference needs to happen.
And Nagoyan, you're supporting that?
Sure.
Yeah. All right, but just how about just a friendly amendment to the motion? Is that acceptable by
Yeah,
both of you?
if we have the technology to do that, I would absolutely agree with that. Yes.
Right. Yes.
We wouldn't post. Just to be clear, as I understand the technology, and I am no wizard, but I think that what you do is you just link from our page where they click on it and it takes them to the county page. You would never post two separate videos or two separate agendas. You just connect them to the same spot, just to be clear in what we're asking for.
That's not my suggestion.
It's not.
Well, I think,
Double up, but to provide a link.
that I think
what I
you're saying,
said.
my understanding is you're both saying the same things. You're
Thank
using
you.
different words, but.
Thank you. I just wanted to make
And-
sure that that's
And
what
so
the
the
amendment was.
direction to Community Mental Health IT would be to work with the Board of Commissioners to make that happen. And it may take some time depending on what technical capabilities CMH has. But the idea being to work toward doing that. We understand the motion? Any other comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Nick, I have you on the list.
Yeah, just, I'm assuming that because the technology and everything's available, there's no cost.
Correct, there's no additional cost. The Board of Commissioners holds the license. And-
I think it's a great idea, I just don't want to take money away from services,
Right.
obviously.
Good point. All right. Seeing no other comments or questions, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So, we will now, people will now be able to see what we're doing, along with reading what we're doing. Next is item 6C, board approval of the executive director contract for 2018 through the year 2020. And before I take any motions or anything, Tracy, would you please give an overview on that and walk through the agenda item with us?
Sure. From my understanding, you're around page 184, 188. I don't have the exact document in front of me, but that's what I was told. So ongoing negotiations have had between the board chair and Mr. Kinch. And in front of you, I'm just going to briefly review the documents. So the first is the board action request. And if you notice, the actual request is to approve the contract between Macomb County Community Mental Health Board and the Executive Director, John L. Kinch, for the purpose of fulfilling the role and responsibilities as the Chief Executive Officer for Macomb County Community Mental Health Prepaid Inpatient Health Plan and Community Mental Health Service Program. The parameters are, of course, January 1st of 2018, as Kathy mentioned, through December 31st of 2020. It's a pay grade in the Macomb County system of 68 at step 6, which is 126, 490, and 11 cents. The change from current would be 2.34% increase, and I will explain a little bit more in detail in a couple of seconds. And we wanted to highlight the next paragraph, which per Michigan Health Code 330.1230, the terms and conditions of the executive director's employment, including tenure of service, shall be mutually agreed upon in the board, and the executive director shall be specified in a written contract. As you know, that your role is to both hire and terminate the executive director. So we bring this before you due to the fact that his contract will expire on December 31st of 2017. The next attached documents is the proposed contract. You have the red line version, so every time you see anything that's in a red font and underlined, that is an addition to the contract. Anytime you're seeing something in red and cross through, it's obviously a strike through. There are only 2 deletions. On page 1, paragraph 5, it's the time frame. So it did state January 1st of 2013. It now would state January 1st of 2018. And then it was ending previously. On the next line of 2017, it would now say 2020, which is obviously a 3-year term. The other deletion that was made is on page 2 at the top, and it's the salary amount. The salary now, it was $118,783.65, would now be $126,490.11. Those are the only changes made to the proposed contract. I would now like to further explain a little bit of the salary. In front of you on the next page, you will find an analysis. On December 31st of 2017, the executive director's current salary would be $122,370.91 cents. As of January 1st, all Macomb County employees are receiving a 1% increase. So as of January 1st, the executive salary would be $123,594.63. And then the proposed salary, which again is pay grade 68, step 6 would be $126,490.11 cents, with the difference of the $2,085 or 2.34%. And then below that, you will find the breakout of how those dollars fall out under our Medicaid, general fund, and local. The next document in front of you is the performance matrix proposed and negotiated with Mr. Kinch and the board chair. And in that proposed, I'm just going to sum it up because obviously it has a lot of information in there. But the main goal of the executive director, as you know, is to sustain and meet all contract obligations under the PIHP and the CMHSP, and of course, the My Health Link. So the majority of these goals in there are doing that, meeting the expectations of those contracts so we can sustain those. There are, on item number 4, some other activities that as the executive director, he fulfills on a regular basis that of course correspond with the contract, but they are expected on a daily basis. And the last document that you're being provided is the most recent CEO compensation and benefit survey. It was done in 2016. It was anonymous, and as you can see, You have A through H of the different salaries, with the overall average of the CEOs for the PHPs in the state of Michigan being 143,000.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Flynn, supported by Kraft. Okay, I see on the speaker list, Brian?
No, I pushed the wrong button, forget it.
Okay, Linda?
I have a couple of questions. On page. On page 186, the second paragraph from the bottom, there is, not that this would occur, John, I'm not, that if the performance could lead to the notice of termination, there's no time frame. There's no stipulated, like, we give him a certain amount of notice. And that seems unusual to me.
It says reasonable time.
It says reasonable time, and who knows what reasonable time is, given the circumstances. So, do we want a time frame there? On page 188, there is something that concerns me. Item A says, a vehicle owned by the Macomb County Community Mental Health Board. I know you get a car, that's great, but, because you have to go to Lansing and so forth, and mileage, it's cost saving. But for us to own it, isn't there a liability to the board, for the board to own it, and can we even own a car? So that's an issue that I have. I'd like an answer to that question.
All right, let's take care of these
Okay.
two that you brought up so far. I'm going to start with the car. It's do you know the answer to that?
No,
Whose
I
name
know
is
that
on
in the
car?
current contract, this is exactly the way it reads.
That came
This
from
is
the
what-
prior, it's
Correct.
always said that.
Correct.
Do you happen to know what it says on the registration? Because I thought it was the county itself.
It may say board. I think they're referring to the board owns it. Community Mental Health has a fleet of vehicles. We probably have 22 or 23 vehicles. This
But
is
they're not county, they're community mental health
the
owned?
Community Mental Health owns those. We purchase those, and then when we're done with them, we send them out for auction. We have about 22 vehicles. Mine is one, and Jim Losey has one too.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and any more, Linda?
Yes, item number 4 on page 193. I'm really glad to see that part about working say the word collaboratively. At the conference, there were some people who made comments to me that the providers would like more interaction with Macomb County specifically. And John's moved to do that. At our last committee meeting, he presented a proposal to do that. So I'm glad to see that that is highlighted there. And I guess that's it. Thanks.
All right.
The 2.34, I don't want to make you feel bad, John, but I thought it would be a larger percentage than that. But I don't know what can be done about that, but that's my opinion.
All right. Now, you also brought up the time frame, and I thought somewhere I saw a 90-day thing, and I might have been reading.
It's the paragraph above it. It's talking about the renewal of
That's the extension.
an extension
Oh,
of a
the
contract.
extension, okay.
Nothing on termination.
All right.
So what would be your thinking on a contract in a, Tracy?
I'll add you to the list.
In the contract, I thought she said I had my turn.
No, I'm putting you on the list, I
Oh.
said. Do we have any comments regarding the time frame?
I do. Kathy?
You want to speak? All right, Lou? And then Nick?
In the event, there are two parts of the contract that speak to that. For example, one part says if the board is unhappy with John's performance, that they should give him written notice of what they're not happy with, and he has 90 days in which to remedy that situation, and the board then revisits the situation. In the event that he chooses to leave, he gives the board 90 days' notice and then indicates his intention to terminate the contract. If the board chooses to terminate John's performance for any reason, they give him 90 days' notice and then proceed in that fact. And in the contract, what I have just indicated are specifically mentioned. So the question is, it is handled in a broad sense, and if you pass the contract like it is, the questions you have are answered within the contract.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, basically, I think, Linda, if you read the two paragraphs together, you'll see what Lou's talking about. To terminate or not to renew, we give 90 days notice. He gives 90 days notice if he wanted to quit. The reason I think that there's no specific time, and it says reasonable time period, agreed by the board and director in the second paragraph, is if something came up where the board was dissatisfied with the director's performance that might lead to notice of termination, the 90 days, then you give written specifics, and there's no specific time in there for response from the director. And I think that's because the dissatisfaction of the director's performance may be something that he can answer in a short period of time, and John and the board could agree on a short period of time, or it may be something more complicated that requires a longer period of time to work it out. So I think that's why it doesn't make sense there to try to put in a specific number, because it really depends on what the dissatisfaction that could lead to termination really is. And I think that's why it's written that way, and that makes sense to me.
Thank you. Linda, did you have any other comments?
Just that I read it differently, I guess. It's a reasonable time is not defined, so.
All right. I don't see anybody else on here, but Commissioner Doherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Commissioner Bush. I don't read it the same way. I see them as very separate and distinct paragraphs. Now, that may be the intent of both parties, but that's not the way I read it. The way I read this contract is we are locked in for the duration of this contract, and that if we are dissatisfied, we give notice, and there is a reasonable period, which is not defined as 90 days, with which to correct the deficiencies, and then it never says what happens if they don't get corrected, right? The paragraph above that is talking about terminating or not renewing this contract beyond the expiration date. Those continued words, that beyond the expiration date, implies that it's at the end of the contract. That's all one sentence. There are no commas, there's no commas in there between, offsetting the or not renew or anything like that. This is talking about at the end of the contract, if it's not, what you're doing, you're giving the 90 days formal written notice to extend and da-da-da-da-da. The next paragraph is talking about performance issues. If they were all one paragraph, they're talking about the same thing. If you had separate and distinction of the termination or the not to renew, that would be different. I think this whole thing, I'm not disagreeing with what we're trying to accomplish today in terms of renewing a contract with our director and the salary rates, but the way this is written, I feel like we are locked in. And if in the event, which I don't think is going to happen, but in the event we were unhappy, we would have to pay for the full 3 years in this contract. And I have had some recent experience with such matters where there were interpretive issues in a contract, and it's problematic. So I think we better pin this down and make sure we agree to that it says what is intended.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you right, from the intent is that this be a 90-day, based on what
So what I
has been
heard,
said.
yeah, what I heard previous speakers say is that the intention is that the first paragraph is speaking about either termination or renewal, right? Which I don't think that's what it says, but these two paragraphs need to address two separate and distinct things. The first one being the renewal process and how to extend the agreement in the event that you're approaching the, like today, right? His contract ends at the end of December. If we can't get this settled today, I think we need to take a vote to extend it 90 days, even if we extend it 90 days with the agreement to give the salary rate increase, but extend this contract 90 days so that we can get this into the first of the year where we can address the writing of this contract. So I think that's the first thing we need to do, is address what happens at the end of the contract and how you extend or renew it. Then you have a separate and distinct topic that addresses if you are dissatisfied with performance, then you address whatever the issues are and you establish a mutually agreed upon time to correct, which in the absence of an agreed upon time will be 90 days, right? You can either set a different time or it's automatically 90 days. And if the deficiencies aren't corrected, it can lead to termination effective immediately so that you don't have to pay the rest of the contract, right? That to me seems reasonable. So, I'm sorry, Commissioner Flynn, did you have something to say?
Yeah, weren't you on the committee that
No.
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
your personnel chair?
Commissioner.
It didn't come through personnel.
All right. Does she know the contract? Kimberly. Okay. All right, so what I'm hearing is that you get a chance to speak. What I see, or what I'm hearing, I just want to clear is that the concern be that if there is termination, a reason to terminate based on performance, that it does not specify when the contract would be terminated or how the contract would be terminated. Is that the concern?
Right. The concern is that it doesn't address the default time to correct any deficiencies. Or, it does address a reasonable time, but it doesn't say, and it says to correct deficiencies as mutually agreed upon, right? So it says reasonable time. So, but you need to say, in the absence of a mutually agreed upon, shall be 90 days, right? Like it's either 90 days or a time that the parties mutually agreed upon. And that if the deficiencies are not corrected, that termination shall occur at the end of that period. And compensation, it stops at that point too, right? Because right now, the way I read this, we're on the hook to pay this compensation for 3 years. Yeah, that's a good point too.
I have Commissioner Bush, and then Birdie, and then Sharon Matero.
I'm more than willing to read the two again and see what Nick was talking about, but I think that paragraph needs to have some time frames, except I am not seeing now, based on what Susan just said, I'm not seeing a way to terminate immediately if we needed to,
So, if I may.
if we lock into the 90 days.
If I may. So if I may address it, so first of all, it's my understanding, we were originally going to bring this to a personnel committee of which I am the chair. It didn't go there because Commissioner Vosberg and I discussed it offline and learned that past protocol was that it didn't go to personnel committee in the past, so we didn't send it through personnel. Otherwise, I would have had a meeting for everyone to partake in it, but we decided that wasn't the way to do it. So that's the first issue to address. I agree with what Linda was saying. I think that if, in the event, the way I was describing the 90 days being a default, that almost serves as, if there were a reason to terminate immediately, you're basically paying somebody for 90 days. Because if it was a reason to terminate immediately, you're basically giving them 90 days notice, you're giving them 3 months severance pay, that, in essence, right? Because they couldn't correct whatever the situation is within the 90 days. So that, in essence, would kind of cover you in that regard. If you had to if there was cause, then you just basically are saying, here's your deficiency, you did something horribly wrong, correct it within 90 days. They wouldn't be able to correct it in 90 days, and their contract would end. That's, in essence, how that works. Thank you.
All right. Lou?
Well, I'm hearing two issues. The first issue was, what do you do when you get to December 31st, 2020, when the contract expires? There's no language that speaks to renewal. Well, the contract expires on December 31st, 2020. If there's no mutual desire to renegotiate, the contract is over. If there's a mutual desire to renegotiate, in September or October, the board chair would be discussing a contract renewal that would come forward. So, when a contract has a closure date, it's over. This contract is over December 31st, 2020. The other question is reasonable time. The reasonable time situation would only apply when the board felt that John's performance in a specific area or several specific areas did not meet what the board felt was an appropriate level of action. If that were the case, the board would give John a written notice of what the board's objections were, and in that period, it would include a reasonable period of time for correction, up to 90 days. The reason for that being written in that fashion, if an objection or several objections were minor, you might say a reasonable time would be 45 days to correct it. Or if they were larger than that, you might say 90 days is an appropriate time for the CEO to correct the action and bring it back to the board. Now, the question of going beyond that, if the board at that point were still not happy with the CEO's performance, then they could give him a notice of termination to be effective 90 days ahead of that. If you do it less than that, then you're not terminating appropriately. Now, if you have cause being a legal term, I think the board would seek counsel from the corporation attorney as to whether or not there might be cause for something less than an appropriate notice to your CEO. I think, frankly, we're complicating the issue beyond a reasonable situation. If that's what you choose to do, it's okay with me, but I'm saying I think it's pretty specific. The logic of serving notice on John's performance, if you would like me to give you some Las Vegas odds, I would do that. I think are rather slim. I'd be pleased to take some bets. I think I can make some money
right now,
on whether that would ever happen. But I think, frankly,
Is that
the
demeaning
contract
necessary?
speaks pretty logically to the situation, and we ought to proceed this evening.
all right, thank you. I think right now, everyone's in agreement with what want to try to accomplish. That we're all in agreement with what we're trying to accomplish and how we want it to end up being. We're just talking about some words right now. Nick?
I'm not sure I agree. And one of the things that disturbs me as an attorney is ambiguity. That's not good for Mr. Kinchin. It's not good for this board. And there is, if Sue can read this one way and I can read it another, and I quite frankly understand Sue's concerns about the language here, then clearly what we have in front of us is some language that's ambiguous. That's not a good thing. So I would move that we extend Mr. Kinch's contract for 90 days past December 31st and refer the contract renewal to the Personnel Committee. And I would strongly urge Sue to bring in corporate counsel or HR from the county so that we can write this contract to say what we mean it to say. This is not, I don't think most CEOs are at will. 90 days, I think, is a reasonable amount of time if we choose to change, and it doesn't require cause to change that with the 90-day notice. The intent is that if there's a performance problem that we think can be corrected, then that's a different situation. But I don't think the intent ever was to say this is a 3-year solid contract, which is what you're reading it as. And the fact that you're reading it as, knowing your background, it concerns me that somebody can read it that way. That's not the intent of this board or anybody else. Never has been with any director. I'm not singling out John. I don't think we're going to terminate him for any reason in the next 3 years, but I don't think we want to create a situation where we're paying 2 executive directors if something strange happens. So
All right.
if there's support to my motion.
Well, I want, before we hear anything more about that, what I mean by what I said is I think this board wants to have a clear contract. This contract language has been in existence for some time. This issue never arose before. That's not to say we can't fix something, but I would rather have us try to fix it tonight rather than delay anything. This contract has stood for some time now.
Well, I'm making a motion to extend the contract for 90 days so there's time to get the language right and to refer the matter to the Personnel Committee, which I think is the proper course of action. I don't know what's happened in behalf, and if there's a second to that, I would urge us to
I'd
do
second that motion, but may I speak to it?
I want to vote to
Stop, wait. We have a second made by Commissioner Doherty. So now we are talking now about extending the contract for 90 days. That's the topic.
It's a motion to extend the contract and refer the contract renewal to the Personnel Committee.
Yeah,
So,
this is
Extend for 90 days.
delay it.
Extend for 90
No,
days.
it's not delaying.
Extend for 90 days and refer to
Refer the new contract
can I,
to the Personnel Committee for
Correct.
clarification.
all right.
but I'm the second,
All right.
so I get to second speak.
Yes.
I'm the seconder, so I get to second speak. Don't I get to speak on it or not?
Yeah, you can. We'll let the seconder speak.
Thank you. Just for clarification to the maker of the motion, we're only referring the contract, these particular sections of the contract language, but I would not have a problem with the pay going into effect. You mean, with January 1st, if this were
Yes.
delayed, is that fine or?
Neither do I, but I was just going to say, as Brian indicated, I'm not sure we can do that. We can correct that problem.
Or we could do it
And quite frankly, we
to
may end
January
up,
1st.
enacting the contract at the December meeting, depending on how quickly you can get get this
True.
clarified, or at the January meeting, and then you can retroactive in the new contract to resolve that problem. But I don't know how you can physically do it in the context of the motion I've made. I'm not suggesting you have to take the full 90 days.
Okay.
I'm just suggesting that it give us a chance to review it as should be done.
Fair enough, because I mean, I supported the motion because I would rather have the wording right, but I don't want it to be financially punitive to the director either. I mean, the intent
Right.
is just to get the language
Well-
right. There's no other malicious intent to not have a contract with our director. It's just to make sure that the language is right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for clarifying that. I have, for speaker, this is on the amendment. Linda and then Lou.
Thanks. I am just totally opposed to delaying his raise. I think the raise should start tonight. So whatever this amendment does to delay the raise is not acceptable to me. I'm the one who raised the question about the language, but had no intention of delaying the raise. So however that gets worked out.
You mean of delaying the contract of
If delaying the, sending it to personnel, did you say?
I said I wasn't gonna.
And I can't see how that, your amendment doesn't
All right.
delay the raise. So that's just, it's
Right.
not acceptable to me.
Lou?
The reason I raised my hand and hit my button was because I wanted to mention, as several others have, that John's pay scale changes on 1 January. And if we proceed into the new year at the old rate, we will have some difficulty if someone wants to retroactively compensate for that adjustment in time. So I want to offer a friendly amendment to what's on the table, that while I don't want to disagree with what's going on here, I would say in a friendly amendment, it should be completed by December 31st at the personnel level, so that his pay can begin on January 1 as appropriate. And I think it would be unfair to do it in any way less than that. So that's my friendly amendment, that it be handled by December 31st.
All right. So what I'm, again, is that with the, what I'm hearing you ask for, let's have it done by the personnel.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
You want to, you're saying not 90 days. You're asking for them to consider not 90 days, but a period less, so that this is all resolved by the end of December? Is that, am I understanding you?
Yes, we're talking about a couple of sentences.
Correct.
You know, if we can't get it done in December, you know, so I'm saying we ought to be able to get it done in December, so that January.
Is your microphone on?
Thank you. That we ought to be able to get it done in December. It's only a couple of sentences. It's a very small adjustment, and it'll be settled, and John can begin on January 1 at the appropriate level, and we won't have any difficulty with the county in acting any retroactive dollars or so forth. That only makes the problem confusing. So let's get it done in December, and it's handled.
Thank you. All right, right now I have a motion on the floor. Well, I didn't hear support for what Lou had just said. For the friendly, are you accepting it?
I'm the maker of the original motion, and the only reason I did the 90-day extension was,
Point of clarification, Nick, the actual original motion was a motion to approve this contract from Commissioner Flynn and seconded by myself.
Right, but they're offering an
and
amendment.
there was a motion to refer, and that takes precedence. But let me say this, the only reason I want to do the 90 days was just on the offhand chance you couldn't get it done in December. But we can do that in December if we don't get it done in December, we'll worry about it later. And unless the chair tells me she doesn't think she can get it done in December, and I don't think she's going to tell me that, I would like to withdraw my motion for the 90-day extension and simply move to refer to the Personnel Committee for the language clarification needed, and we can finalize this at the December meeting.
Okay. And no, he withdrew, or you restated. All right. Thank you. And Mr. Kinch has basically agreed with that because we need to have a Personnel Committee meeting before the end of the year anyway. do you think that, I think it's something that can be done within that time frame because we're all in agreement with the concept of it. We just want it worded in a way to be able to enforce that. All right, so we have a motion then to.
I think my green light's on.
Well, I don't see you, but I'm happy to.
Right here it is, request to speak.
That's fine. Joan? Oh, there it comes on. Now I see it.
You know, this is a big hassle. It should have been in personnel at the beginning. I can't understand why there wasn't a personnel meeting, Madam Chair.
Well, there wasn't. We're moving on. We're getting the problem solved.
Okay, and if it's going to delay our executive director's salary, I will not vote for anything. I don't see any reason why we can't vote for this and let it go through tonight.
Thank you. So we have a motion to, oh, it fell off. I saw it earlier and it fell off, but Brian? It should say.
This whole thing should not even take a half a day to get fixed. I mean, all they have to do is rewrite the paragraph a little bit to adjust for the concerns, take it to the personnel meeting or whatever, or
Right.
and have a vote on it to make the changes, because it's only just clarifying exactly what it says. I mean, this is not at the end of the month. I mean, it's a one-day change, one paragraph into something.
Correct.
So, I mean,
I think we agree on that.
okay, I'm just trying to point that out, but it does have to be clarified. If there's people that can read it differently, that's going to cause a bunch of headaches if it ever gets into it, so it needs to be clarified.
Thank you. All right, let's take a vote on the referral to the Personnel Committee, to the next Personnel Committee. All in favor? In December.
Thank you.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I oppose. Mhm. It's going, but I just. And Flynn? Mhm. All right, so this contract then will go to,
It's just that one section of the contract. It's not the whole contract. To deal with that whole.
that issue, yes, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
No, it's just that one paragraph instead of getting into another discussion.
Correct. In the event of dissatisfaction with the director's performance, that's the part. All right. That motion has carried, so we will be sending that to the Personnel Committee, which then at some point we're going to have to, before we leave tonight, we're going to have to set the meeting for the Personnel Committee. Let's see what else we have on here. Item number 7, a resolution for.
Get clarification that you understand what the language is that we want to change in there, so it doesn't take all day to figure out.
We'll let Commissioner Doherty we'll let her consult with Corporation Counsel and/or
Who
CMH
serves on
Counsel.
personnel?
We'll find that out in a minute. Let's finish the agenda here. We got item number 7, retirement of Dawn Frankhouse from the Access Center. Is that a motion? By Flynn? Support by Kraft. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Then we have item number 8 is just to receive and file the Medicaid billing verification audit summary for fiscal year 2017. Motion by Birdie, supported by Nagovan. Any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next item, motion carries. Next item is the voucher listings.
I move to pay the bills.
Support.
Motion by Birdie, supported by Nagovan, to pay the bills. Any questions or comments on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is the management report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to present the management report. I have some materials that I want to pass around for you, and I'm going to also include, Kimberly's passing it out to some of the staff, and I'm going to explain why as well, okay? There's a lot going to go on in the next month, so I wanted to be a little colorful, highlight it as well too. So, first, as we typically do with your calendar, if you look at your calendar, the State of the County Address is scheduled for Wednesday, December 6th. That's at 6 o'clock at the Lorenzo Cultural Center. So you should all have invitations and be interested in participating if you wish to. We have a Recipient Rights Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday, December 7th at 7:30 a.m. We have a Program and Budget Committee meeting on December 13th at 6 o'clock. Our full board, CMH board meeting is Wednesday, December 20th at 6 o'clock. The Macomb County CMH Holiday Open House, our annual open house for our staff board, Citizens Advisory Committee, Provider Network, and commissioners, county commissioners, we invite those, and the county executive's office is going to be December 21 from 1 until 5 o'clock at the Community Care Center on 15 Mile Road. It's up from 1 to 5 o'clock.
Linda.
And we do need a personnel committee. In the midst of your discussion, I was also trying to be transparent that for other reasons beyond the contract between the CEO and the board, we need a personnel committee meeting. And if there's any chance that we can get that on or around December 15th, which is a Friday, that would be great. But I'll defer to the chair of personnel to arrange that for that meeting tonight.
Do you have, Commissioner Doherty, do you have a suggested meeting time?
The December 15th, you said is that the preferred date, or you just need it by that date?
That was the date we had in our mind. You can have it whenever you wish.
I'm fine doing it on the 15th, that's a Friday, right? But I understand, can we do it either the 14th? Could we do it the 14th
Is that in the morning?
in the morning?
The 15th?
So do we have a record of who, is Personnel Committee of the Whole? I should know that, but
It's a committee of the
it
whole.
is a Committee of the Whole, okay.
Question, does it have to be in December, or can we do it November 30th? Does that meeting have to be in December?
I think there's another issue that we need to address that would be too soon, right? I mean, it would be too,
Okay, I didn't know there was other issues that are involved.
because this was requested before we just made the motion to have this one, so I'm assuming there's
Are
something.
we talking the 14th or the 15th? Which is it?
Well, before we talk about that, the question was asked, can it be earlier?
We can be ready to go when you're ready to go.
Oh, we could be.
Yeah.
So,
Is that a Monday? How about the 1st? Would the 1st work for everyone?
Friday, December 1?
December 1st in the morning?
December 1st?
Yeah, it's a
First.
Thursday, Friday.
Friday, December 1st,
The
7:30?
executive board meeting has been canceled for that morning, so that would work.
Why don't we do that?
Okay, December 1st.
All right, so Friday, December 1 at 7:30 a.m. at the Administration Building on Hall Road will be a personnel committee.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll make sure we get that posted. Moving on,
bet
the
you would.
the Program and Budget Committee meeting for next December 13th, coming up on December 13th. There will be about a half an hour presentation by Kimberly Cope, who is going to do corporate compliance training on Medicaid, fraud, waste, and abuse. It's a mandatory requirement that the board go through the training. You'll receive the PowerPoint slides on December 7th in your program packet. You should take a look at them and review them in advance, and then Kimberly will do an overview or a PowerPoint here during the Program and Budget Committee meeting. We also are going to provide a marketing update. Some of the board members had requested that we provide that, and that's on the agenda for next December 13th. the Chief Financial Officer, Cynthia Mack, is going to do an overview on the interim financial services report, the FSR. As you know, we submit them to the department, and I've talked about this before, and you will see our updated financial. I'm going to give you a peek at it tonight, but you're going to see the updated FSR on the agenda for December 13. And then other items as they come up, we're also going to certainly have on the agenda as well, too. If you turn to the second page of this document that I passed out, I continue to try to illustrate to the board, and I know as you understand it, and I understand it, it's a pretty complex issue on how we continue to look at internal services fund, financial risk management strategy, and the like. And so this is just a different illustration of it. For our PIHP contract for 2018, the Medicaid contract, I rounded that up to $170 million. It's about 169 and some change. So the projected revenue that we will have to work with in this current fiscal year is $170 million. 7.5% of that is that ongoing fund equity risk that we're performing with the Department of Health and Human Services. That 7.5% risk is equal to $12.75 million, $12,750,000. So as you know, the contract reads for the first 100 to 105% over in expenditures, Macomb County, that first 5%, we're at full risk for that, and that's all on us. So that amount is $8,500,000. And then from 106 to 110% over budget, should we find ourselves in that situation, then that's split. That's shared, 2.5% Macomb, 2.5% the state of Michigan. So we both split that at $4.2 million. And then anything over 10% of that budget is all on the department. So we're not going to see any financial loss beyond the 10%. The PIHP contract, the Internal Services Fund technical requirement, this is what the contract actually says. We've talked about this for the last couple of months. Section P8641, that PIHPs may establish an ISF for the risk corridor of financing in accordance with the shared risk provisions contained in the contract. The second bullet there, an ISF may be established for the purpose of securing funds necessary to meet the expected risk corridor financing requirements. And then the third one, when established an ISF, the PIHP may apply any method it considers appropriate to determine the amounts to be charged to the various funds covered by the ISF. Okay, the quote by Mr. Renwick when we met with him was that Macomb's actual ISF balance should be a reflection of Macomb's assessment of risk, Macomb's risk management strategy, and other available risk mitigation measures. So none of that has changed. Yesterday afternoon, Cynthia Mack and I, the CFO, were on the phone with Bob Sheehan and Alan Bolter and described our situation to them. And, they clarified for us two things. One is that if you have an offer by the Speaker of the House, Mr. Leonard, of $7.5 million, even though it may be verbal, it would be wise to continue to pursue that from their vantage point. The other discussion that was quite striking with them as well is that if you're going to have a financial risk, you have to have an ISF, an Internal Services Fund. You better have something, because if you never have the monies to be able to handle your side of the risk, you'll never get to the department. The department is not going to kick in any monies until we kick our monies in. And so therefore it was a light on moment that you better have enough ISF to be able at least to get into the to cover your own risk, because the department's not going to bail you out until you've thrown your own money at that. With all of that being said, our interim financial status report, follow me down on this piece of paper here, our Internal Services Fund, and Cynthia Mack will explain it to you next week or 2 weeks, we're looking at $7.3 million. It changes every quarter. It changes in the tune of millions of dollars, but you're talking, a 1 or 1.5% or 1.5% change. But when you start talking millions of dollars, it seems quite notable. But what you'll hear on December 13th is that we actually have a $7.3 million ISF right now, that our total revenues are 168 million, as I told you, I rounded it. These are the actual revenues projected, 168,966. The total expenditures are 164,034. The surplus, we're going to have a surplus projected at the end of next year of almost $5 million. So what you have appearing in front of you is a balanced budget for this year that we're in right now. So we projected, that we will have $12.2 million on October 1st, 2018. It's all projection. With that being said, what remains on the table is the ongoing challenge that we will have, is that if we're going to show evidence that we have a projected budget, the department's going to pull out their ISF and say, look, Macomb, you have a balanced budget. And if that's the case, that's going to be working against us the whole time that we work with the Macomb House and Senate delegation, as well as the Speaker of the House towards the $7.5 million. But I can write the letter. I provided a copy of the letter that was sent last time. I've started to draft it. This is the letter that I sent last time to the Speaker of the House. My strategy would be to include this letter as a reminder of where we were at, and if we wanted to pursue those $7.5 million, say that we would want to use that in the means of a business strategy, and perhaps that we would be able to bring some staff back on that are currently vacant positions, and that perhaps we could pass some of those revenues along to our network of providers as a way of a rate increase. But that's a slippery slope as well too, as you cut services to consumers, that you're going to turn around and add a bunch of staff. Lou?
John, the question that I have on page 2 is, does the 12,000,002 include a transfer of approximately 6 million from the ISF, from the Healthy Michigan to the ISF or the PIHP?
A small portion of that is that $5 million is the general fund that's used as a placeholder. The other $1.3 million is going to either be straight Medicaid or a combination of Medicaid and Healthy Michigan plan, but it's not the $6 million anymore.
But it includes a transfer to the PIHP ISF from Healthy Michigan of some dollars.
Correct.
Okay, then my point is that if we're to include this letter to the Speaker, the second letter needs to include a clear bullet point that the 12,245,000 is not a spendable, committable ISF. You need to mitigate the fact that the State Department will say they have a balanced budget and their ISF is up to the appropriate dollar, when in reality it is not. So if we're to continue pursuing, and I think Sheehan and Bolter are correct, that we should pursue the Speaker, then we need to mitigate the obvious strategy of the State Department, which will indicate that we don't need the money because the ISF that you will send into the state is not a real ISF if it ever comes to having to commit the dollars. So you need to clarify that with the Speaker, and frankly, more so with our reps and senators, so they're aware of the fact that when the State Department says we don't need it, they already have a bullet point letter that is really very simple that indicates that the number is not an ISF that could ever be committed if it had to be. And I think if you don't do that, you don't stand a chance with the Speaker, because the State Department, I think's plan is to say we don't need it. So that's the comment I think that we need to make.
That's a great point, and I've heard you say that before, and I would agree with that. When Cynthia and I craft the letter to the Speaker of the House, we'll make sure it's bullet pointed, we'll make sure it's specific. And if that's the direction the board wants me to go, I'll do that, and we will be very clear on what is available in the way of our internal services fund, how much of it is masked by the Healthy Michigan dollars that really can't be applied to the Medicaid B3 state plan services.
I also think, if you don't mind, John, that you should briefly indicate to the speaker what the ISF is supposed to do. He might not know what the ISF is supposed to represent, in the sense that it's a so-called insurance policy for the state against a bankrupt situation, which is a simplistic way to put it. And if the money that shows up as a bottom line is not applicable, then when the state says it's balanced, the reality is it's not, if it's not applicable. So I think we ought to treat the speaker on the basis that he may not know what an ISF is. Let's take a moment in a sentence or two to professionally indicate what the reason for an ISF is. It's a state's manner of ensuring a backup against PIHP bankruptcies, in a sense, is another way to put it. And if the ISF number is not applicable in its totality as stated, then it's a false number. So I think taking a moment to explain that to him might be prudent.
Okay.
So on that second page there, John, where the first line under interim financial status report, the internal services fund of 7.3 million, that's you're saying is still represents that transfer from Healthy Michigan. So it seems like perhaps itemizing both of those under that 7.3 million would be helpful in the ongoing understanding too.
Right. And I didn't want to get ahead of the ISF report that we're going to provide to you on December 13th, and I may have done that a little bit, because of that $7.3 million, $5 million of that is the dollars that were awarded to us by the legislature. The other 1.3 million is probably a mix of Healthy Michigan and Medicaid, but I can't speak to it right now because I don't have the report in
Okay,
front of me.
so I guess maybe what we're both saying, it'd be helpful if we had that
Sure.
scheduled out, even if it's in parentheses, but to have that there, because you probably have your own way that you're required to report. Linda?
This is confusing to me again, because when we first went to the legislature, we showed them red ink. Maybe Lansing debated it or whatever, but we're not showing them any red ink. They gave us the 5 million and said, come back October 1st and we'll look for a way to get the other part of it. I don't know with how you're showing them that we still need the money. I think you need a new narrative then, if you're asking. I agree with Bob Sheehan. If someone's going to entertain the idea of giving you 7 million, go for it. But the narrative isn't anymore that we need to fund our ISF, really. So it's a different story. It's what one representative said to me, to get back some of the money that they really shouldn't have taken from us. So I don't know how you go with all this black ink and ask for money based on last year. So, do you? What do you think, John?
Part of that discussion with Sheehan as well too is to clarify, our business strategy, because we have, hurt the providers with 2015 rates, and we're going into 2018, so we want to restore the, some of the, the reimbursement rates to providers if that's a possibility. Perhaps bring on some administrative staff that's desperately needed around here, relative to being capable and compliant with the contract, to not have to ask our staff for furlough days any longer, to be able to restore our acute psychiatric inpatient hospitalization rates. So it would be more along the lines of the business strategy that we would offer up as a basis for a continuation or ask for those dollars and not to go to our internal services fund. And that was the discussion that we had with Sheehan. Nick?
No?
Yeah.
Nick, go ahead.
John, did you have any discussion on any of this yet with GCSI, with Gary?
No, I haven't.
It might be helpful because the legislators were the muscle, but the verbal commitment was through GCSI. And I suspect what you need to do, and I think Linda's point is well taken, if you're showing we've got enough money, it's not going to look the same, but you have to split that 7 million to the 5 million that came from the extra money. We wouldn't have had it, but for that 5 million, you got to split it between Healthy Michigan and regular Medicaid. And you have to remind the speaker of something he knows, but in the course you can never stop reminding, is that this number has jumped all around over the last year, up and down and all around, because budgets are projections, they're not guarantees. We don't know what utilization's going to be. We've got a projected utilization, but we don't have a crystal ball. Utilization may be much higher, may be lower. That's always the problem you have with budgets of this nature. And the only other thing I would suggest is that we might also want to again have a conversation with Oakland County, separate from this issue, only because there's strength in numbers, and they lost money in that whole deal as well. Not nearly as much as we did, but enough to get their attention.
All right. I can proceed accordingly if that's the interest of the board. Majority of head nods and defer to the chair on that. I will talk to Gary Owen. I will also talk with Willie Brooks, Oakland County, and draft a letter to Mr. Leonard, and have a different business strategy on how we're going to ask for those dollars.
All right.
Sure.
Don't, wait, just a minute. I was informed, Brian, did you want to speak on this issue? Sure. You had a question? You don't have to. I know you want to speak, but that's how I can see you.
The other the question I have is, in the discussion that we had previous meeting was for Tom Remick. He said we didn't need that, and we were going to send a letter out to him and also send it to the Speaker of the House or the department head, whoever it was, that he was going to, if he signed off on that $5 million or the ISF, that this would not be an issue. Has that gone anywhere?
The letter hasn't been drafted yet.
Because I mean, I'm thinking that
we went up to Lansing. We talked to Tom Renwick and John Duvendeck and Kristen Jordan, who are the finance folks with the department. We talked with them. We've talked with, came back to the board, discussed it here again, talked with Mr. Sheehan and Alan Bolter to get up our facts in place. We also know too that some time ago that Nick Lyon himself and Chris Priest, the director of Medicaid, we went and met with those two guys, and they said they would not stand in the way of what was a $37 million reduction in Macomb, and it was reasonable. At that point in time, when we met with them, Chairman Vosberg and a few others were there. I don't mean to leave anybody out. They said it was reasonable. They said it was understandable. It was just a matter of how to get those dollars. So the $37 million reduction has not gone away. And we have the director of the Department of Health and Human Services and the state Medicaid director until he retired that were in agreement with the fact that it's reasonable. It's a matter of how to get those dollars. So we had the supplemental in the 2018 budget, and we have the verbal offer with the Speaker of the House. So I think we need to, Mr. Brody's suggestion and others, that we need to recraft a letter and send that to them and stand put that we're going to use those dollars. We'll use those dollars wisely and continue to make, our PIHP viable in a place that serves our consumers well.
Okay, and then I would just suggest whatever letter you send, you might want to CC all the House of Representatives and the Senate representatives that are in Macomb County, so that where the letter went out and they have it actually documented, and also to put pressure on them that they know that they're aware of this.
Yeah, when I author something, I typically broadcast it pretty well. I'll do that, sir.
Thank you.
That was done in the previous letter, too. All of those people were CC'd. To this point,
Given the quote from Nick Lyon, John, it might be prudent to indicate to Renwick that given what his boss said, how can he formulate a position that we don't need the ISF? Am I not being logical? His boss said our approach was reasonable. Renwick says we don't need it. Perhaps Renwick ought to be reminded that his boss says that our approach to fulfilling the ISF situation is reasonable, and maybe we can head him off before he tells the speaker that we don't need it, because he set us up to do that. So I think we ought to maybe get ahead of that wave and quote that meeting of both of those individuals whereby they are in disagreement with Tom's position. What the hell?
You know, there's a paradigm shift that's occurred here, and we're all aware of that. It was just in 2010, 11, 12 that it was a mandate through technical advisory that you create an ISF and make sure you have that ISF to protect your interests as a PHP. And at one time, Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne had a considerable ISFs as well as savings, and there was a corrective action plan, and we lost dollars there. The paradigm shift is now that the department, through the rewording of the contract, is that we're really not interested in an ISF. It's kind of like a fund equity in the school district. They want you to maybe hang up 10% fund equity, and some districts, some administrations now are saying, look, put the money in the way of services to the consumers and don't hold $15 million around in your pocket. Put those monies in the way and delivery of services to the consumers, and that's all well and good so long as the confidence in this administration and this board is that our risk mitigation strategy is that we're going to match our revenues to our expenses. And then when we fail to do that, or should we fail to do that, we would historically, and haven't ever been in that really situation, last year we would pull our ISF out. If we have no ISF, I'm just saying the obvious, we're going to go to the county executive and ask for the $12.5 million, because it is the county who's going to be on the hook for that. Then the department has no issue with that. The department does not have an issue with where we're going to get those funds. They just don't want us in the new paradigm to hold a significant fund equity. They want us to define a mitigation strategy that matches your revenue to your expense. And good luck with that.
but interestingly enough, when the board just approved the Board of Commissioners approved their budget, I believe language was in there. They will not give one more dime to community mental health. That, it didn't say one dime, but no additional funding.
Yeah, just to clarify that a little bit, there was fear that the Community Mental Health Board would come to the Board of Commissioners to try to get the funding that the state wouldn't give. And in the new budget, it was decided not to give that money for this calendar year coming up. But luckily, it sounds like we're heading on the right path. But that was in the budget for the county budget that was just passed last week, 2 weeks ago.
Nick, I guess. Nick was up first.
Yeah, John, if we didn't have, or if we entered the risk pool area, which hopefully we wouldn't, nobody's suggesting that we should, but obviously that money has to be paid. As an agency who's on the hook, is not the county on the hook at that point?
You know, I've heard Mr. Birdie speak to this before, that the state treasurer is just going to tap the county treasurer and
It
pull
would
the
come
money
out
from
of
the county
county
treasurer,
funds,
if
yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
And I think that's true, but obviously we don't get into that situation for about 100,000 different reasons that I can think of. The statute, as you quoted it the last time, gave us 3 options for having reserves, if you will, the ISF pledging assets, which we can't do because we don't have the assets, only the county could do, and reinsurance. Have we ever looked into the issue of reinsurance?
No, not to my knowledge.
I mean, it may be prohibitive in terms of expense. It may be totally illogical, but I think it's something we probably want to check out just so we know what our options are.
Okay. I'll make note of that. Follow up. Lou?
If I look at your page 2 here, John, frankly, it would not be prudent for us not to cover the $8.5 million or the $4.2 million. In any event, those are the dollars that would necessarily impact initially. And it wouldn't be prudent for us not to cover that. As I've said before, in my opinion, this whole thing originated when the state looked at authorities who had broken away from counties and were now independently operating. The state emphasized ISFs in order to put authorities into a position where they had this backup dollar in the event that they faced a bankruptcy situation because they had lost county backups. Our situation as a county department, and I think only one other PIHP in the state, are still county departments. So theoretically, if we went bankrupt, the county would be responsible for the $12,750,000 right off the bat, which would be a very imprudent situation for us to be operating in that fashion. So I don't think we have an alternative if we're to be responsible. Column A and column B, we need to cover, period. So, because we are a county department, and not to do that would put us and the county in a very negative situation. And if we didn't cover it, as I've said before, what the state treasurer would do would sweep state funds to the county regardless of what department they were headed for in order to cover our liability. And that ricochet would be terrible because other departments who had an expectation of state funds would be saying what's happened. So you'd have a chaotic situation evolving. So regardless of what Tom Renwick says, I think our major responsibility is to cover the first two impacts, period. And we need to make that clear because we need to protect our position with the county and to protect the county as a department. And if we don't do that, we're seriously at fault.
Okay.
Well, that's exactly what we're discussing here, is the paradigm shift from before, when that was the contract expectation, that you had 7.5% fund equity, or ISF, and now the contract doesn't read that way. You don't have to do it, you just have to do the risk mitigation. So I repeat myself with that, and I understand the experience of this board, and myself even as the CEO being more comfortable having the ISF in hand than versus a mitigation strategy, and that's the department's fine with the mitigation strategy.
But the risk management that the contract now reads speaks to authorities who may, on their own property. So an authority who has bought a building, like I understand Oakland County recently bought a new office building, they could declare the funds in excess of the mortgage liability to be a fund equity situation for Oakland County. We don't have that opportunity, so Renwick is applying a contract language to us that is not applicable, John, and he's using language that benefits authorities in saying to the speaker, and to our legislators that we don't need the money. So again, forgetting
All right.
what the loophole has been, our challenge is to present the data to the speaker and our legislators that indicate, regardless of what the contract language is, our situation is seriously different. Now, we can beat that to death forever, but that's what it boils down to, period.
All right, let's move on. Points well taken.
I have enough information to go on, and I will draft together a document, and I'll move forward on that quite readily as well too. And I appreciate everybody's interest and comments. Moving on to the next item in my agenda packet here is 298 pilot update. I'm going to table that in the interest of time right now and not speak to it because there was another document that came out at 1 o'clock this afternoon that spoke more strategically on how the 298 initiative is going to move along. And when I get back to the office, I will put that in the mailbox, and I also mail it out to every one of you in an email. So there's more explicit and comprehensive information on the 298 developments. The next issue is mental health parity, equity, mental health parity, Addiction Act overview, and I'm gonna pass on that right now as well too. We've all talked about mental health parity, and we're working through the PIHPs with the other 9 PIHPs to be able to put the mental health system and the substance abuse system in line with the requirements for parity. And, really comes down to the fact that there's qualitative and non-qualitative services that you're going to provide to consumers. And through your utilization management practices, you cannot be more restrictive in what you would be doing in the way of authorization of mental health services than you would with primary care or ambulatory care services. So for inpatient services, by example, the utilization management standards for acute psych would have to match that for ambulatory care. And for outpatient services, our utilization management practices, an outpatient is just not outpatient therapy. Outpatient is everything else but inpatient. CLS, residential care, those types of things, that we would have to have a utilization management practice that is no more restrictive than primary care. Emergency care, we don't do a service authorization for. In the prescription drugs, that's going to be more on the HMO side. One of the other caveats to this is that Macomb County PHP as a utilization management MCO cannot treat providers disparately. So we can't treat Easter seals, by example, differently than how we would treat our own service providers. So we're going to have to fix that as well too, because we do require Easter seals to call in for authorization for services. Our direct operated service are carte blanche. We don't require our therapists to ask for prior approval. We're going to have to fix that. So we have time, and we'll work with the other PHPs and we'll craft a strategy. But you're going to hear more and more about mental health parity and addiction equity. I had a couple typos in there. The one document, and the reason I wanted to pass it out to so many folks here, is really related to hepatitis A outbreak, and spent most of the afternoon trying to play catch up on this issue that the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services recognizes southeastern Michigan as being, I'll pass this out, as having a high incidence of hepatitis A, and so they wanted a corrective action plan on how it was that we, as a community mental health services program, was going to work with our community on addressing hepatitis A in our consumers for who would be at risk of exposure, whether they're mentally ill or those that are substance users, as well as our staff and the community at large. And so there was a document that was sent out by the health officer, William Rodella, and the medical director from the health department, Dr. Lokar, and there's a number of informational pieces here that are related to hepatitis A, how it's spread, what are the symptoms, how do you get treatment, where's the vaccination stations. And so that information has been uploaded all of our employees receive that information, as well as my strategy. When you read that document that was really authored today, I had the wrong date on it, that we are going to have not only all of our staff aware of the seriousness of the hepatitis A outbreak, but also we are going to work with our caseworkers. Jim Losey and I talked about it a little bit ago, that our caseworkers, our nurses, our therapists, our supports coordinators, our doctors are all going to collaborate on being able to get our consumers to primary care physician and or to the health department for vaccinations as they're interested in participating in doing so. We're also going to send that notice out. Christina Ritz, our director of business, going to send that out to our entire provider network, and also ask them if they can use the attachments that are in these documents here, that they also include those flyers and warnings and notices as paper copies in their lobbies, points of entry where our consumers are showing up, and with all seriousness, pay attention to the hepatitis A issue that's going on. So I don't know if you have any questions on that. And then I think I already indicated that I sent a letter to Jody Lewis and explained what Macomb CMH's response was going to be. And a couple more things, and I think I'm done for the night. Joy Calloway, as you know, I think I informed everybody, Joy Calloway was recently named the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority CEO. She comes from New Center CEO, Community Mental Health Services in Wayne County. We had a conversation today. I called her up and congratulated her on her position. Gave her a little background where Macomb and myself worked with Vita Sharp and with Jeff Brown as the Metro Region CEOs, and then later on with Willie Brooks and Tom Watkins, and that Willie and I both look forward to working with Joy when she gets on board. And so hopefully her contract will go through. Willie Brooks. Oh, Joy Calloway, she's the CEO for Wayne County. Did I misspeak?
No.
Willie Brooks is the CEO.
For all?
No,
He turned it down.
He turned it down.
Yeah.
Well, you got a program, you still can't tell it.
So anyway, I did extend my congratulations to Joy and look forward to working with her in the Metro Region. Chris Priest, as you know, is the state Medicaid director. He was in that position maybe for about a year, and he replaced Steve Fitton, who retired about a year ago. And then Chris Priest has recently announced that his retirement, and he's moving on to the private healthcare industry as some other role, and no longer the state Medicaid director. So lots of moving parts all the time. I appreciate everybody's comments tonight, the discussion that's going on. I really want to thank the administrative staff that I work with. If we're going to be thankful about things, as a CEO, I enjoy working with the board. Thankful for you and your support. The administrative staff, they work tirelessly, day in and day out, all day long, in the evening hours, on the weekends, and I got the board has a great administrative staff, not only in the executive staff, but the senior staff as well. You just can't tell you how much hard work they do all the time in trying to move the system forward and continue to keep Macomb in a very positive light. So my sincere thanks on Thanksgiving to my staff. And then a nice Thanksgiving to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is any other agenda items from the board members? Seeing none, we'll move to item 12, hearing of the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this body? You have 5 minutes.
Good evening once again, members of the Community Health, Mental Health Board. That was a very excellent discussion there. I feel that the issue that Mr. Birdie had brought up regarding the residential group homes, if it's basically going to be funded through any taxpayer dollars, that should actually be unredacted and available for the public. I was recently in Clinton Township where there was a large amount of people that were against group homes, and there was the issue about Class A, B, or C, but the idea is that was presented to the public where the group homes would be, and then the public came in and they resisted the exact structure. Nothing should be really secret and silent. As I look around and I look at your names for the first time, I notice most of you have run for elective office or have held elective office, and people's names are basically available in the qualified voter file, year of birth, middle name. In this day and age of transparency, there is that division between what should be available to the general public so they can, in a public meeting, address the public body on concerns that affect their neighborhood, especially when we're dealing with community and mental health. There are fragile areas where you cannot trespass on somebody's health concerns, but at the same time, if you're going to expend taxpayer dollars, the issue does come down to is it should not be redacted. I felt that your discussion regarding the labor contract was very elaborate, and it really didn't need to reach the point that it does. There's, corporate counsel looks at all the contracts of the county, and the idea is that I feel that, the issue is that Mr. Kinch is doing a knockout job. That dissertation on the management report, because I follow financials, tells exactly where the community and health services to Macomb County are in relation to the rest of the state. And as he so eloquently put in his presentation to the Board of Commissioners, is that basically because Macomb is in that 6-county area where a lot of the recipients of the services are at, that they wanted to basically redistribute the amount of funds to the rest of the other counties. As you know, Michigan has 83 counties, and there are some areas where people are just moving, and so what they're doing is taking the large chunk of money from where it's being utilized to areas where it may be utilized in the future. And like I say, the people that actually are part of the community and mental health groups, all of the staff, there's never enough money and there's never enough people to provide the services. And like I say, I'm from the city of Warren, where I do see an exorbitant a number of people who need the counseling, have sought the counseling, and have basically improved their lives based upon what the state forces the county to do, because basically counties are arms of the state. I do want to point out that, when it comes down to the actual general fund budget in relation to taxpayers, that there's been a slow erosion over the last 4 or 5 years of the number of people that are available as far as the actual people that are employed by the county in one way, shape, or form to provide these services. So congratulations, Mr. Kinch, your grace under pressure. As far as in all of the budget presentations, very rarely am I impressed with a lot of the things that are presented. And as I say, if you could provide to the general public what kind of services are offered, that they can have a warm, fuzzy feeling that the legislative body or any body public is doing it what's in the best interests of the citizens of Macomb and beyond, even beyond those borders, because a lot of it is not just micronized within the jurisdictional boundaries of Macomb, but it's dealing with the tri-county area and then some. I do want to point out that I'm having a problem with one of the therapists that runs out of the First Resources Treatment Southeast on Harper. This individual has been harassing me, and basically I feel that as a therapist that this person is not offering what I consider to be useful, positive health, safety, and welfare licensing or therapist results to the people of the county of Macomb. I did notice when I was perusing the website earlier today, there was a complaint form. I'm going to take that route. I feel that the individual, this therapist that allegedly works out of St. Clair Shores, has been harassing me, my friends, and my neighbors since January of this year, and I'm going to put a stop to it. I don't really feel that suing the county in any way, shape, or form is going to resolve the issue. It's more I see the complaint form, and perhaps what I can do is I can basically find out how to address this body, because most of the people that work in community and health do a fantastic job. And I mean, many of the people that service the community are here this evening and probably not getting paid for it. But like I say, the issue does come down to, for my first mental community health meeting, I appreciate the coffee. I'm at my 4th cup. And at the same time, I thought that the discussion was really good, because it gives me a warmer, fuzzier feeling that basically you, the members, residents of the county of Macomb, are taking an active part in providing the services to the residents of the county. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 13, which is adjournment. We have a motion and support. All in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a happy Thanksgiving.